Good evening. Roman Catholics around the world rejoiced today as cardinals in Vatican City elected a new pope. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, now Pope Francis I, is an Argentine born to Italian immigrant parents. He is the first Jesuit and the first Latin American in modern times to lead the world's 1.2 billion Catholics. Bergoglio had reportedly gained the second highest vote total in several rounds of voting before he bowed out of the running in 2005 when Vatican insider Joseph Ratzinger was elected Pope Benedict. Unlike many of the other papal contenders, Bergoglio has never held a top post inside the Vatican administration before this. Initially trained as a chemist, Bergoglio taught literature, psychology, philosophy and theology before taking over as Buenos Aires Archbishop in 1998. He became cardinal in 2001. The election of Pope Francis I seems to have shifted the gravity of the Roman Catholic Church from Europe to Latin America in one fell swoop, and many people believe and see this as an emphatic salute to the growing power of Latinos across the Americas. Pope Francis I is seen as sharing his predecessor Benedict's core doctrinal positions and is not considered likely to push changes in positions like the Church's ban on the ordination of women priests or its strict opposition to abortion and gay marriage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight on The Big Picture, we discuss the election of the new Pope. We talk about Pope Francis the man. We talk about the plethora of challenges that he faces. And last but not the least, we look at the implications of the Roman Catholic Church getting a South American Jesuit Pope. And joining me on the show tonight is Father Stanley Kozichira, Media Director, Diocese of Delhi, John Dayal, former President, All India Catholic Union and senior journalist as well, Professor Sheetal Sharma, who teaches European Studies in JNU, and Pramit Chaudhuri, Foreign Affairs Editor with Hindustan Times. I'd like to start, however, with Pramit Pal, if I could. First thoughts, Pramit, what do you make of Jorge Bergoglio, seen as a Vatican outsider, never held a post in the Vatican or the Curia, being elected over individuals such as Cardinal Scola, also Cardinal Ortega. Now, Cardinal Ortega is seen as a Vatican favorite, was seen as a Vatican favorite.
Right.
Now, Scola was seen as someone who would have curtailed the privileges of the Vatican bureaucracy. How do you really read this development?
Well, I think the most significant aspect that is, as you mentioned, is that he was Latin American and a non-European in terms of his geographical origins. Latin America and the Caribbean are actually the single largest geographiable area of the Catholic Church. I think about 40% of the Catholic Church's adherents come from that area. So in many ways, this was long overdue. It's been the European domination, if you wish, of the papacy this was a good signal. It was, as you know, there was some talk originally of somebody from Africa, which is in many ways the fastest growing geographical area for the Catholic Church being considered, but I think Latin America makes perfect sense to me. It is, as I said, it's now the heart of the Catholic Church in terms of the numbers. In many ways, many of the ideological debates and so on in the Catholic Church that are taking place globally, Latin America is at the heart of it. Liberation, theology, all of these have their origins in that area.
Right. John, do you agree with Pramit? Now, by choosing the first pope from, say, the so-called New World, the cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church seem to have sent out a strong signal, a signal of change, the message of change, that the future of the church lies in the global south, in Africa, in Latin America, perhaps even in Asia. And also that a scholar with the common touch may be its best choice to sort of inspire the faithful. Your thoughts on that?
I think the biggest thing about the Pope is, by the way, the focus shifts from Europe, not to Latin America, but to the south. And I think in that one fell sweep, is the word he used, is the whole crescent from the Philippines all the way to Argentina,
right,
and everything in between, India, Africa. That is now at the center of the church. It also means many other things that have dominated the discourse of the Catholic Church in the West: pedophilia, corruption. They are not on the back burner. They are to some extent diffused. They are not the major issues for the church now. Poverty is. Poverty is a major issue. Human dignity is. So that is one issue. The second is, I don't entirely agree on the other issues also. The Pope is not part of the Curia so far. And therefore, as an outsider, he has an overview, he has an outsider's critique of it, and is in a position to take, because he's not an insider, he's in a position to take stern and strong action.
So he has no baggage of
He has no baggage at all. And therefore we are expecting a zero tolerance on sex abuse, on corruption, and from an Indian point of view, on caste and other issues that beset our people. Lastly, I would say, he is a man of the people. He knows poverty from his own country. He travels with the people. He has his pulse, his finger on the pulse of the people. And for an Indian Catholic, that's very important. He is not going to be somebody looking at us from the outside through a microscope. He knows what we want.
He knows the problems of his people, is what you're trying to say. I want to come to Father Stanley right now. How would you react to the opinion, Father, expressed by some quarters immediately after news of his election came through, that this is a so-called, and I quote this, a safe choice? A scholar with a common touch, yes, but also a theologically conservative pope, I beg your pardon. It's said that he scolded his priests when they refused to baptize the children born out of wedlock, but he still staunchly opposes gay marriage and contraception. Is this a safe choice?
I think he is actually living what Catholic faith actually teaches. Centuries down the line, he is doing that. And if I join with John, what I will say again is, like in the Bible says, I will give you shepherds after my heart. Jeremiah speaks, Ezekiel speaks. And the first feeling that I had yesterday was this, that we have a shepherd after the heart of the Lord. Basically because, as he said rightly, he's a pastor. Unlike the many insiders, he's a pastor who lived with his people. He knows the situation. And as knowing the situation, it becomes a more pastoral responsibility to correct the issues related to the people. Like I've been a parish priest. So when I go to a family where they are not living, they are in a living relationship or marriage is not proper, it hurts me. So I have a kind of a serious concern that they get married, they live in the proper religious setup of the social situation of the marriage. So as a pastor's heart will go out into the side of the morality, I think he is on the safer sound and all the more on the right path what the church wants the world to do.
You're obviously happy with this choice. And,
Definitely.
And so are people.
Very excited
very
about
excited
it.
as well. I want to come to Sheetal Sharma, Professor Sheetal Sharma right now. Professor Sharma, how do we see this in a social context? Now, we discussed, and the last time you were here on the show, we discussed how the rise of so-called secularism in the West, especially in Europe, poses a challenge to the Catholic Church, which of course wants more and more people to come to its fold. How do you see this particular Pope dealing with that?
We'll discuss about how he will deal that with this a little bit later on, but currently in the changing times, faith and religion are walking on a very tight rope because there is a kind of rise of a group of people, those who are believing without belonging and those who are belonging without believing. And it is very critical for faith and religion now to integrate tradition and modernity. They have to include some elements of change and modernity and be in accordance with the changing times and demands of the people. At the same time, maintain the depth and integrity of the religion as such. Right. And in this condition, the Pope, now Francis I, he has to play a very critical role in terms of projecting a combined image, which is not very conservative, that takes you back to fundamentals, which is responding to the demands of the modern society, people. Because they are not just inter-religious problems which are coming, even intra-religious. Say your stand on sexuality, gay marriages, or on abortion issues, where even within a religion there are a couple of people, those who have a different kind of opinion. Right. So he has to have a balance in integrating these kind of diverse perspective within the religion. Right. So this is where he has a very challenging role to play in the coming years and address these issues.
Absolutely. We'll come to what you said. We'll talk about it later as well in the second half of the program. We'll take a small break right now. When we come back, we'll talk about the challenges or the potential challenges that Pope Francis I will face in his papacy. We'll come back in just a short while. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to The Big Picture. We, of course, discussing the world has a new Pope. The world's 1.2 billion Roman Catholic population have a new head. Pope Francis I, of course, has started his papal reign. I want to come to Father Stanley first. Father Stanley, the new Pope faces a host of challenges, like I mentioned, ranging from the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems is the shortage of priests now around the world. Also, like I mentioned with Professor Sharma, rising secularism in the West. That sort of thinking sees the church, the Roman Catholic Church, as increasingly out of touch with modern times. There's also growing competition from other evangelical orders, other denominations as well, especially in Africa and Asia as well. Not to mention the sexual abuse crisis that has dogged and did dog Pope Benedict's reign as well. Now, Pope Francis I has his plate full, right?
Yes. I think I should begin with his name. You know, he is Francis of Assisi. He wants to take that name. And if you analyze the whole life of Assisi, that's very simple lifestyle. Francis had a dream, rather a kind of a call to conversion, which was said, rebuild my church. That was in the 12th century. Now Francis realized that he has to go and build up San Damiano, the old church, dilapidated church. But the Lord wanted something else. The moment when Pope Francis I took up his name for the first time in the history of 2000 years, first name Francis. What he is trying to tell the world is, it is rebuilding the Church of Christ. So even if it is a plate full of issues that he has to face, a man with simplicity and utter humility, that is what I felt yesterday when he is asking people, bowing down, please bless me before I bless you.
That's something that people saw as completely unconventional.
So a person with that kind of a feeling and simplicity, humility, and a deep conviction about rebuilding the Church of Christ and taking the name of Francis itself is the greatest challenge. And a person, he will guide, the Spirit will guide him so beautifully. You know, yesterday we were saying, there was a seagull on the chimney top. Francis Assisi was somebody who used to converse with birds, animals, and everything. He used to go and preach to the fish. He was very excited about I think the first person to protect the environment in the 12th century was Francis of Assisi.
So the signs are all good there.
Beautiful
the signs are all good. John,
so to say,
No, the girl could well be warming its feet. So I'm not going to set much store by that. But I think as a Jesuit, Francis I, and he'll be the first for a very long time, does not disown the heritage of Ignatius nor of Francis Xavier. So he is in his own ways a revolutionary. He goes out, and I think it's very important for us to see that he is both all these Francises and Ignatian characters, and that is very important. Also, he has other Ignatian traits. The Jesuits, as we're all told, have the sown an oath of poverty. And his personal life remains poor. He travels with the people, he cooks his own food. Maybe even now he would, I don't know, only in the public.
He refused to live in the official residence in Argentina.
In the public sphere, of course, he's the Pope and therefore has to obey whatever is the norm for that posting. But he remains a simple man, and I think it's very important. But you know, when talking of the Pope, I always want to find out, what does he mean to the Indian Catholic? I mean, I'm very impressed what he means to the Latin Catholic, and they're very excited as their own.
And rightfully so, yeah.
But I am no less excited, because what are the issues that we are looking for? The issues of the West are not our issues. We have our own issues. The Church has its own crisis. We are grappling with casteism within the Church. We are grappling with casteism in Indian society. We are grappling with the tribal issue, with POSCO, with the whole jing-bang. What does the message come from Argentina? What does the message come from Argentina through Rome? I think those are exciting things for the new Catholic. He is, and for the bishops in India, not to be cowed, not to be afraid, not to fear the government. Do what is lawful, do what is just, do what is right.
But are you expecting, since Pope Francis has taken over, are you expecting, with renewed vigor, evangelical positions to be strengthened in India?
Evangelical positions as in proselytization? No. Evangelical positions in taking a stand against poverty? Certainly, of course. See, popes don't act by diktat.
They guide.
They guide. They set up an example, and they radiate energy. John Paul II, throughout communism, as they all say. I mean, that's what those
More than a Catholic figure, I think Pope John Paul II was a world figure.
Yeah, to that extent. But it is the fact that we have somebody who knows, as I said earlier, who feels, who sort of gives vibrations, as we would say in the Indian yogic context. And that is very critical for us. She's talking of modernity, obviously. But modernity also has these new problems that we face in India. And he has to tackle them, combining within him this totality of faith.
I want to come very quickly to Pramit Pal Chaudhuri. I have a couple of questions for you. Now, there are all sorts of reactions on the news, full of hope, like, of course, Father Stanley has showed us, desperate for a change. A lot of skepticism as well, Pramit. Would I be correct in saying, if I said that it would be naive to expect huge changes in faith? But there could certainly be hope for, let's say, some sort of reform of the institution, particularly while dealing with the allegations of sexual abuse within the priesthood, that perhaps there might be a growth in tolerance rather than, if I could borrow a word from the New York Times, rather than a belligerence of dogma?
Yeah, well, I think Mr. Dayal is correct that one of the key points is that he's going to be coming from a section of the church that has not been touched by these scandals on child abuse and so on that have ravaged the church up in the West, and in many ways, I would argue, weighed very heavily on Pope Benedict, and maybe one of the reasons that he decided to step down so early. So that definitely helps him come in on a clean slate. I think you've already seen that in Argentina there has been criticism of his past, basically that on the issue of the disappeared, the people who were taken away and killed by the military regime. He had remained too silent in their view. And I think that's going to be in many ways, the biggest challenge that any pope will have, which is politics, basically. That there will be a political challenge that he has to face because he has a global spread, and as he said, he doesn't have executive power, he has the power of guidance. And you could already see, for example, the Chinese government already congratulating him and simultaneously issuing him a warning that the Catholic Church in China will remain firmly under the power of Beijing. And it was, you could see that roughly within a 24-hour period, Xi Jinping becomes the final official ruler of 1.2 billion Chinese.
Right, and
at the same time that the Pope becomes the head of a church of 1.2, but one is a civil society organization, one is an extraordinarily ruthless and efficient state structure. And immediately one of them issued a challenge to the other and saying that I think there were about 20-30 million Catholics in China will remain underground, will remain firmly under the control of Beijing. And there's been a constant battle between the Vatican and Beijing over who has the right to ordinate bishops there and so on. And that's the kind of battle that he's going to have to face.
I think you raise a very pertinent point. Professor Sheetal Sharma, take China for example. Now, as it is, Xi Jinping has said that they'll remain firmly under the control of the Chinese authority. How will the new pope, or how can any pope deal with something like that? When you're dealing with, say, China, who is, like Pramit said, a ruthless state, what options does the pope really have?
See, I agree with what Pramit has said, that there was a point in time in history when church was in authority, so church decided what to do. Now the situation has been taken over by the state, and the kind of state under which church is now operating as an institution among the other institutions. And this is very true in countries like China or the other countries where the state
there is some sort of a dictatorship.
Yes, where state, I am being very diplomatic on that front. So where they hold the power. And they tend to keep people under their control because of various socio-political implications of rise of such kind of social movements that can come up and challenge the authority of the state. So this indicates two things. One, the superiority of the state over the religious institutions. And second, religion becoming a private affair, where religion has to again gain the strength to mobilize people into a greater number so that it can pose a challenge to the existence of the state.
Right.
That is what we have to see.
And how he actually manages to do that.
Happens.
Professor, we'll take another short break. We'll come back when we'll talk about what can we expect in the future, what kind of shape the church might take. Of course, we are sitting in a studio. We don't really know what might happen, but of course, we can talk about it. Big Picture returns after the small break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to The Big Picture. We're discussing the new Pope that the world has just got, Pope Francis the first Jesuit and the first South American in modern times to become the Pope. Father Stanley, I want to ask you this. Not only does Pope Francis have a plethora of problems, like I said, he also had one particular problem, that of the management of the Vatican Bank. Now, that has been an issue in Europe for a while now. One of the final acts that Pope Benedict did was he appointed a German aristocrat in charge of the Vatican Bank. If I get his name right, his name is Ernst von Freiberg, or Freiberg, however you call it. Do you think that that Pope Francis's outsider status, which he has right now, he's not a Vatican insider, may be an asset or will be an asset, allowing him to approach the institution with a fresh eye, and like I said before, without any baggage? In that sense, do you think that's a positive for him?
I think with his coming in, things should change. Since he's not coming with a kind of a preconceived idea, as you said rightly, no baggage with him. So he will try to see things in a new light. Maybe taking stock of the situation will also help him to revive the situation what is happening in the financial issues. The cloud over Vatican on financial matters maybe.
There have been some
moving
opinions
a
which
bit.
say that the transparency standards haven't really been met.
The thing is, I don't know, with the church there is a lot of secrecy. Whether it is in the matters of finance or with the religious, lot of secrecy. And as you said, the modernity and the ancient system, what we were seeing was that only. At the Sistine Chapel, we were actually looking at the chimney, waiting for the chimney to show the old ancient system to show. And what happened, we are excited about it. So the whole concept of secrecy level that is in the church, I don't know, will it be kind of opened up to the world? Maybe towards the financial secular matters regarding all those, maybe opened up to regularized situations, maybe with his interest in public interest, and also man for the poor, social justice, which are actually very keen issues which he was actually tackling in Argentina.
On a day-to-day basis, that is.
Definitely, and that will actually help him to see the situation of Vatican and rather clean up the situation.
John, is the outsider tag an asset for him?
Of course, it's an asset, but I would like to take up this issue of corruption and transparency. Tackling corruption and transparency, according to me, are two different issues. I don't mind him being as secretive as possible if he cleans up the mess. And I already said there must be zero tolerance in corruption. Transparency is, why should the world know what the Vatican has? I mean, they used to say about Jesuits, even the Pope doesn't know what the Jesuits are up to. Now the Pope is a Jesuit, so he has to know what they're up to. But
that's why they have no Jesuits.
The second issue I want to touch was, which you didn't touch, was on the core values. I do not expect any instant change on abortion. Because that is one of the core issues of things. Gay marriages, I myself am opposed to it. I accept the fact that they're gays and they have legal rights and all the things, and they should get pastoral care. It's very, very important. But gay marriages, gay adoptions are a different cup of tea altogether.
And anyone can have an opinion on that.
And the issue of women as ordained priests is also pretty tough nut to crack.
It's a tricky
It'll
issue.
take several more popes before it comes through.
Absolutely. Prof, I want to ask you this. You mentioned political baggage as well that he has. The new pontiff is not without some political baggage. Like you mentioned, mostly in Argentina in the 1970s, especially the torture of his two Jesuit priests.
Yeah.
If I'm getting their names right, Orlando Yorio and Francisco Jalix were kidnapped and from the slums that they advocated the liberation theology.
Right.
Now, I'm guessing that might not or will not be an issue anymore.
Well, liberation theology, I think, my understanding has peaked in many ways. It peaked in the 1970s and 80s and has died out. It was a sort of merging of Marxism with religious Catholicism. And he's an example of a person who takes, as is mentioned, has a very strong focus on poverty and social issues, but combines it with a traditional Orthodox view on the theological concerns. So liberation theology is, yes, it's no longer a concern. I think, in fact, a bigger concern for the Catholic Church in Latin America is the spread of the Pentecostal Protestant churches, where Latin America was a continent that was 100% Catholic only 50, 60 years ago. And today, I think it is already about 25% Protestant. And that evangelical movement that's been spreading across is actually one of the biggest challenges to the church, that it has to maintain the orthodoxy, look at the social issues, and be able to provide the spiritual message that the Pentecostals are now being able to push forward.
Right. Professor Sheetal Sharma, we discussed a point before which you wanted to talk about. Very briefly, we don't have much time left. How does he tackle so-called rising secularism in the West?
See, he has to cover a wide gap. From one end, he's representing the global south, the third world countries, and quite diverse kind of people located at different places on the spectrum, right from very orthodox to liberation theology kind of thing.
Somehow, yeah.
So he has a tough task in front of him. He has to show that integrity. He has to take up the challenges of blending tradition with modernity, what he can change quickly or what will take a number of popes to change. So these are the things, which are part of the wider debate, which certainly, is something now we are seeing as great set of expectations with the recently elected pope. But however, we have to take or give some time, to these institutions to cover up and address issue of large number of people.
Absolutely.
Where there is so much of internal diversity within one faith that it is really a tough challenge and task to integrate wide variety of people demanding different sorts of things and with coming with different set of expectations.
Right. About 30 seconds left. Yeah, please.
This whole debate about the Pope and about Catholicism, once again, let us give God his due.
Absolutely.
The Holy Spirit is working.
Absolutely.
And that strengthens the Pope as nothing else does.
Fair point, fair point.
Modernity, politics,
I want to close the
nothing.
show with Pramit very, very quickly. Pramit, till recently he rode the public bus. He cooked his own meals.
Yes.
He made a wisecrack, if I can call it that, a slight joke when he came to the St. Peter's balcony, and he said that my cardinals had to go to the end of the world to find a new pope. Now, how do you see him? Do you expect to bring, I mean, obviously you would expect him to bring these qualities when he's leading 1.2 billion people around the world. Do you also expect him to re-energize the church's evangelical agenda around the world, which has been slightly, if I can use the word, subdued in the recent past?
Well, I think it's been strong in the global south. As I said, in Africa, for example, the church has been a remarkable success. The spread of Christianity in places like Nigeria, which was a Muslim-majority country, is now a Christian-majority country. It's one of the most remarkable changes in modern times. It's something that happened in medieval period, but now it's very rare for that to happen. So I think the strength of that spirituality is there, but it's largely in the south. But the money is up in the north, and it's the North American church, it's the European churches, which are by far the wealthiest.
Right,
and in many ways, striking a balance between that
that'll
and
be
the
his
rise-
biggest challenge. I
One
think,
of the
striking
biggest
the
problems
balance.
that he's going
Absolutely.
to face.
On that note, I must end the program. Of course, the world has a new pope. We'll have to give him some time to get into his groove. And like John said, if you believe in a God, he's at work, the Holy See is at work. We'll have to wait and see what he really comes up with. All the time we have on The Big Picture tonight. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.